Hello everybody and welcome to my foundational video on GitLab. So it's the first time I introduced GitLab in this channel and I believe this stock has a lot of potential. It's less than a year old, recent IPO, but it's really a stock that could have really high growth, hence the title of the video, could it actually 20x? So before I get into the topic, let me give us a little background here. What is the mega trend that underlies GitLab? Well, the mega trend is software, developing software for anything the modern enterprise does. And software is really at the heart of modern enterprise. The more companies implement software within organizations, the more they are driving away their biggest cost, which is human capital. And as you drive out human capital, you increase productivity through software. I do believe this is a central thesis of investing for the next 10, 20, 30 years is we're moving in a world where everything is run by software. Software runs the world. And this is a company that is very interesting in this space because GitLab, to the best of my understanding, and videos of interviews and things that I've seen, people that I've used it. What is GitLab? That is the software that you use to build software. So GitLab is software to build software. And to get to this conclusion of what GitLab actually is, to understand, we have to understand what Git is or what a Git is. So a Git is kind of a slang origin in IT, but a Git is simply a code repository with version tracking. So whenever an engineer makes a change, software engineer changes something, you can track the changes, and if there's a mistake, an error in the code, you can go back to the old version, the last time the code ran, and you can just update your software and go back to where you left off before there were any mistakes with your code. So code is developed through versions, V1, V2, V3, etc. So Git is essential to that. And Git was the first big innovation in coding workflows or coding teams. And after Git, we've had this website called GitHub. So what is GitHub, which is what I will then introduce as perhaps the only competitor to GitLab. GitHub is a social media, a sort of social media built on Git, or at least that is the original use of GitHub. And now GitHub is much better and they have a lot of features, but originally GitHub was more of a social media where you could follow popular coders and copy what they do and look at their repositories, etc. So that was GitHub. And then a few years after GitHub, GitLab came around. And GitLab is much more of a teamwork tool. GitLab is a tool, it's a software tool that allows you to build software based on the basis of the open source Git repository code. So that's what GitLab is. It's a cloud enterprise, a cloud host for all of your code repository. It's tool where your team, all of your engineers work on this tool and develop code on this tool. And it has hundreds of applications within that tool for creation, deployment, integration, verification. All of the nitty-gritty that goes into developing software can be handled through GitLab. And GitLab is slowly emerging as the number one app in this space, even though they are competing with GitHub. But there's reasons why I think GitLab is much stronger than GitHub on this. So let's look at a little bit at what it is. So GitLab is what? It's a single application. And I encourage you to go look at videos on the internet of the web app that GitApp is. But it's a single cloud-based application for what they call DevSecOps. This used to be called just DevOps, and now it's DevSecOps, which is development or developing your code, securing your code and then deploying or operationalizing IT operation of your code. Uh, so it's got security, it's got developing, and it's got deploying, right? And this is shown in this chart where you build code, you write code, you plan, you deploy your code, you operate your code, and then you go through a loop between development and operation, a continuous improvement loop with iterations. And then at every single step of the code, at every single change, you need to take care about security. And security is ever more important in IT, which is one of the new things that GitLab really handles, which I really love, because security is recession resistant. And why do we need a software like GitLab? Really, it's because the days of do-it-yourself software development are nearly gone. The days of you sending emails to other software engineers for developing a code, these days are almost gone. And these tools are almost becoming essential because everything is so much more complex. IT is so much more embedded with other forms of IT. There's so much more complexity in today's IT. And so if you don't have a tool like GitLab, you're going to be in trouble to develop your code. So that's why it is the software, the web software, the software to develop software. That is what GitLab is, software to develop software. And GitLab is wonderful because it saves you a lot of money when you use software, when you use GitLab. Software engineers are in very, very, very high demand, and they're very expensive. And you want to get the most out of your software engineer. You want to get the most productivity. And this is a chart from their annual report showing that, yes, by implementing GitLab, you can get actually a 400% ROI on your spend. You spend money on a tool that actually break evens really, really, really fast as soon as you set it up, and then can increase your speed of development, increase your speed of operation, and increase the quality of your software. So software that develops software. What a powerful value proposition. But there's more. There's more for GitLab. GitLab, since the days of Amazon and Good to Great from Jim Collins and the Flywheel, a lot of good strategic companies use the idea of a flywheel to develop their business. And GitLab uses what I think is a wonderful flywheel, which is more features attract more users, and more users attract more money for in-house development of the software, and also more users attract more free community contributions, which leads to more features, which leads to more users, which leads to more development, more features, more users in an unstoppable flywheel. The idea of a flywheel is it gets ever faster and ever faster until it becomes unstoppable, like a regular physical flywheel. And this is how the mode of GitLab develops itself. But I really want to call your attention on the idea that community contribution is key in software. And GitLab is getting a lot of its R&D for free from its community, in addition to what they actually pay for their R&D expense. So this is, I think, a really, really big deal. The software culture is one of open source and one of sharing. And so people often will share their ideas with the apps that they love. And this is a really good strategic position for GitLab to be in. The software will get better with time. And so what I also love about GitLab is that it's inherently aligned with the world of developers, with the world of software engineers. There is a big alignment, and I really love that. First of all, Git and anything that has to do with Git is almost sentimental for software engineers because it has Linux origins. And if you know anything about computing, you know that software engineers love things like Linux, and Git has a relationship with Linux. There is some sort of a romance, I believe, between Git and actually how high people think of Git. The same is true for open source. typically people in software, people in tech love open source. And that's why you can explain a lot of success thanks to open source, right? Android is open source. Linux, especially when it comes to servers and operating servers, that's open source. RISC-V for semiconductors, that's a quasi open source system. There is a love of open source in the IT slash software community, and GitLab is open source. So we can understand why the basic version of GitHub is going to get so much innovation. Another thing, GitLab is cloud agnostic. It's not like GitHub. It's not a company that will be pushing you for example, to use Microsoft Azure. No. GitLab is cloud agnostic. You can install it on any cloud you want. And you don't have to also use GitLab's servers. You can install it, you can take ownership of it, or if you want convenience, you use GitLab server. But I think this is a big deal because when you do research on GitHub and the acquisition of Microsoft by GitHub, um, there was a lot of backlash for Microsoft acquiring GitHub, and there is still a segment of the software development community that just does not like Microsoft. Microsoft has kind of bad reputation, and so I think this is actually a competitive edge for GitLab to not be associated with Microsoft. And then you're not locked in. Which is another advantage of using GitLab, which is going to be attractive to your IT personnel and to your companies who don't want to be locked in. Finally, open source. Open source is, like I said, the biggest deal, the idea that you can use your community to develop a better product. It just builds a tremendous network effect, which I think underlies this business's moat and is so essential to this business's moat. So you may wonder, all of these good things going for GitLab, how does that translate in terms of growth? Well, let's look at revenue growth. Revenue growth does not lie. It's actual customers spending money, giving up hard-earned dollars for a product. Revenue growth does not lie. And GitLab's revenue growth has been nothing short of outstanding. It is growing at 74% over the past a little more than 2 years. 74% year-over-year growth. That is a tremendous growth between FY21 and FY23, knowing that GitLab has a forward accounting year. So that is why, but that's a realized number. That's 74% annualized growth. And you may think, oh, maybe this is new, maybe this is slowing, but it's not slowing. Let's look at this. The growth is actually accelerating because if you go back in the IPO document and look at the data of the IPO document, you can see that this growth dates from 2019, right? $59 back in 2019. So this growth has been just continuing, right? 59 3 years ago, right? And then 2 years ago, you get to 119. And 1 year ago, you get to 185, and today you are getting anyways, the growth has been growing quite a bit. This is one way to look at the chart here when you put them together. Growth has been tremendous. The growth is not slowing down. This business has known two crises, the crisis of 2020, and I would argue the Fed crisis of 2022, and it is not stopping growth because it's a valuable tool, because it's a tool that saves money, because software is a secular trend, and having the software with which to build software is one very important thing to have. So could growth continue at 70% going forward? I really believe so. I don't see any reason why it couldn't. I mean, the total addressable market of GitLab is still growing. Companies are still adopting software and developing software and more software. The world needs more software as software drives productivity. The flywheel of a product means that the product just gets better and better and better. So what is the growth runway? Well, it is tremendous. It could continue like this for 5 years, maybe more than 5 years. It is tremendous. What is the competition? Well, the competition is Microsoft and GitHub. And when you search online, you can find a lot of comparisons between GitLab and GitHub. And so it may be a good idea to talk perhaps to a technical person, but per my understanding, GitLab is better. Everything I've seen, GitLab is better on every single point over GitHub. And perhaps that is not surprising because GitHub is just a side business for Microsoft. GitLab has the full strategic attention of its founder and of its people. It's not a side business. Microsoft, oftentimes they will take ideas of other companies and implement them, but these ideas will be just good enough. They won't be the best. They will be just good enough. Microsoft Teams versus Slack, Microsoft is just good enough. So they'll be good enough. But GitLab, I think, will remain the number one, the premier software that builds software. And that is very powerful. Customer concentration, I see none to speak of. Retention. How much money do people spend more year over year? More than 130% retention. That's wonderful for a SaaS company. We really want to see that. Macro sensitivity. Well, first of all, this is software that saves costs. So companies in the recession that we're hitting right now, I believe they're likely to keep spending money on what saves you cost. And then it deals with security. GitLab is important for your security. It's DevSecOps. Security is the last thing to get cut for IT businesses. So I do believe it is resistant to a recession. Growth by acquisition has been very reasonable, mostly very small companies. And another kind of orange flag here is, yes, there is a large marketing expense for GitLab, but that is smart marketing expense. If you spend marketing to gain customers that are going to stay with you presumably a lifetime because their engineers are used to work with GitLab, that is a good marketing investment, right? It's just not, you're not spending a bunch of marketing for one sale. You're spending a bunch on marketing for years, perhaps decades of recurring, growing, right? Retention rate is one for recurring, growing long-term sales. So I believe in a situation of a SaaS company like GitLab, it is really worth it to spend on marketing in their situation. So let me move on. Okay, let's talk about bankruptcy because I only care about growth. Growth is the most important thing to me. So in order for the company to keep growing fast, I want no fear of bankruptcy. And when I look at GitLab, they have a little bit of stock-based compensation, so that probably helps. But their free cash flow is positive. So they're free cash flow positive, and they have $930 million in cash. So not only do they have enough cash, if they were to face a really bad quarter, they have enough cash to do that. But they're cash flow positive right now. And as long as they keep close to cash flow positive or close to zero, I am fine with that. I want them to focus on growth. That is how you get outstanding returns. When the company grows at 70% compounded over 5, over 8, 10 years, that's when you get outstanding 10x, 20x returns. I believe this is a company that could do that. The market cap is only $5 billion for this company, for a company that has such a important value proposition of the software that builds software, a company that is this dominant in this narrow growing field. $5 billion is not a lot for that sector, for this SaaS sector. 89% gross margin. Price to sales 13.5, price to gross profit 15. Again, this is very reasonable, as I'll show you next slide. The company has no debt whatsoever. This is an anti-fragile company. Just like with their cash position, they have no debt. So the fears of bankruptcy, in my opinion, are not there for GitLab, right? What is the dilution? Well, they did their IPO. So when a company does IPO, you can expect a lot of dilution in the first few quarters, but they are on path to slowing down their stock-based compensation. So there is way less dilution. And I expect, like most SaaS companies, I expect this to be flat going forward. Insider ownership, 70%. That's very high. I love that. And the founder is still leading the company. The founder of the company is the CEO. Next, revenue per employee. This is another one of my favorite metrics. I want revenue per employee to be high. Normally, I would not say $204,000 per employee is high, but for GitLab, I will, because GitLab, as an international workforce, where salaries are not that of San Francisco, The San Francisco is the GitLab is incorporated, headquartered in San Francisco, but most of the employees are globally spread out where salaries are much lower. So actually for GitLab, when you think about the revenue per employee, it's actually very, very high because they have a truly international workforce and the salaries are lower than the Bay Area. Let me move on. So again, this stock is a great stock. They've been doing so well. This is not investment advice, of course, but because we've been doing so well, of course, well, the market right now doesn't like long term, and since the market right now doesn't like long term, they've been selling it just like any innovative company. They've been entirely crushing them. So minus 70%, right, in just under a year, in about a year, minus 70%. So absolutely unwarranted when you consider that this company has been growing and accelerating its growth of earnings. Market cap is only 5 billion. I love that. You can really see a company doing a multiple X when the market cap is so small. Price to sales 13.5, price to gross margin 15, growth 70%. So when we compare this company to other companies that I really love right now, we can see that the valuation is in line with, say, a Datadog, but lower than a Snowflake and lower than a Tesla. And if you compare GitLab to Snowflake, just on those numbers, not looking at the underlying business, it's really attractively valued, right? And I put Tesla in there, even though it's not a SaaS company, but it's still kind of a premier growth company that everybody has, I think, a right handle and the right intuition on. So GitLab is attractively priced, in my opinion, not investment advice. And lastly, let me go with trademark of the channel. So could this 10x or 20x in light of the value of the US dollar? So I believe the US dollar is going to keep diluting. $1 today is worth $1 today. But really, $1 in 2032 will be closer to 25 cents of today because the money stock is growing at a rate of 15% per year. The money stock is growing. Deficits are forcing the Fed to engage in quantitative easing, which means the value of the money decreases. We have monetary inflation. So keeping in mind that, do we think we can get to a 10x or 20x in nominal terms? Well, let's look at that. Let's do it in nominal terms. A 20x would be 108 billion in 2032. 108 billion in 2032. If we were to adjust for today's money, that would be $27 billion. Can we imagine the software that builds software 10 years from now, when software will be much more prominent? Can we imagine that company be worth 27 billion? And I have no issues imagining that. I am buying this stock. I believe this stock will do very well. And again, this is not and will never be investment advice. This is entertainment. But this market has unfairly punished all companies that are innovative, that have amazing business models without really looking under the hood. And this is one that has really truly been punished, I believe. So thank you so much for watching my video. Don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel, and I appreciate your time. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.